Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Is this on? Good evening. Sorry to interrupt the schmoozing, but we have some continuing programming for this evening. My name is Bruce Jones. I'm the Vice President and the Director for Foreign Policy at Brookings, and it's a delight to join Martin and Chaim Saban in welcoming you here today. I hope you've enjoyed the proceedings so far. I think the pre-dinner conversation with John Allen is going to be a hard act to follow, but we've got a pretty juicy subject to continue with, which is the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. As this audience knows very well, there has been no shortage of debate about the merits of the JCPOA since the P5-1 concluded their negotiations 2 years ago. Proponents of the deal lauded its provisions for intrusive verification and monitoring and its reductions in Iran's centrifuges and stockpiles of low-enriched uraniums, but many have criticized the terms of the deal both as inadequate and short-lived, too fleeting to lessen the threat posed by Iran's nuclear capability, or at least its latent capability. So for that reason, the JCPOA serves as a starting point for a conversation we'll have tonight about whether we should keep the deal in place, can it be amended, what options do the United States, do Israel, and other states have for increasing their negotiating leverage with Tehran, and how can we curtail Iran's destabilizing regional behavior? And to delve into this question, we planned very, very well, and we had a great debate between His Excellency Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister and Minister of Defense of Israel, and the Honorable Tom Cotton, Senator from Arkansas and Chairman of the Armed Services Subcommittee on Air and Land Power. But sometimes in Washington, politics trumps, so to speak. And unfortunately, Senator Cotton is caught up on the Senate floor with a, I guess, a somewhat consequential bill on the tax issue. So he sends his deep apologies for his absence. But we're going to continue tonight's discussion in any case with Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Goldberg, and neither require much introduction. Ehud Barak, as you all know, has been a strong defender of Israel's security, serving for 35 years in the IDF, and then as Chief of the General Staff, Foreign Minister, Defense Minister, and Prime Minister. Jeffrey Goldberg, who has been a long friend of Brookings, will channel his inner Tom Cotton tonight, as well as serving as Editor-in-Chief of The Atlantic, as you all know, a profound and careful watcher of the Middle East and of American foreign policy, and his writings gives an incisive view into American thinking about the region. We're very grateful that they could both join us tonight, so please join me in welcoming Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Goldberg to the stage.
Thank you, Bruce. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for being here. When I found out that Tom Cotton couldn't be here, I asked Joe Lieberman if he would play the role of Tom Cotton, but then I realized that Lieberman is too hawkish to play so I needed to find someone else. So I will channel my Tom Cotton. Mr. Barak, thank you for being here. Why don't we start with Iran, and since it's just the two of us, we could go range a little bit more widely to such issues as your future in Israeli politics, which I think some people in this audience would like to talk about. But let's start with Iran. I remember 5 years ago sitting with you and leaving a meeting with you and thinking, well, they're about to attack the Iranian nuclear facilities. This is when you were defense minister. And so let me start with a two-part question. The first part is, why didn't you attack Iran when you had the chance? And two, why have you become a supporter of a deal that you told me and others you feared very much?
About the first part, we were never too happy to hear about Iran, but we understood out of our responsibility that the situation can be created where there is both operational capability, there is international legitimacy to do it, and compelling need to do it until certain date before it's too late. And under these circumstances, it might end up being totally irresponsible if we are not ready not just to talk about it, but to execute it effectively and thoroughly. So that's what we prepared. Unfortunately, we had contact with the Americans. Not a big secret that we could not convince the presidents at the time. I talked personally one-on-one with two of them, could not convince them that's a good idea to be enthusiastic about it. We didn't ask for American enthusiasm. More problematic was the fact that we basically did not succeed in convincing our own, both professional leadership and at the crucial year, not even a majority among the inner cabinet. So we found ourselves at the end in a situation where time had come, election came here, and the contacts about the coming deal or potential deal made or cut underneath our legitimacy, international legitimacy to do it. We had also a big exercise with the American forces on an issue that happened to be defense of Israel against missile attacks from Iran, out of all places. Was very close, weeks from election. It was not the right time to consider it. So basically, we thought, I think that we did the right thing in spite of all the debates. I'm sorry
Could
that
it have
we
worked?
couldn't.
Do you think it could have worked?
Yeah. It
Worked
could
for
work.
how long?
Yeah. It probably could delay them. You know, at the early years, it might delay them by probably technically 3 years, probably altogether in real life 5 years. Toward the end, it was much shorter time. That was one of the problems. Every year, we got into shorter framework. Probably in the last year, we could think of 1.5 years or 1 year, which makes it practically 2 years. But we have to bear in mind for all those who say that, oh, so does it make any sense to delay them just by 3 years, let's say? I want to remind all of you that when we attacked the Iraqi reactor near Baghdad, we could not assume that we are delaying them by more than 3 years, because they can easily approach the same French company who built the reactor, tell them now you will get 50% premium for the risk, build it again within 3 years. It was the same situation. And the same somehow applies wherever or whoever destroyed the Syrian reactor, Deir ez-Zor, could not assume that it delays them by more than several years, because they could contact the same North Korean company who built it for them and ask them to build it again. So I don't underestimate 2 or 3 years of delay. Of course, when it comes to almost ridiculous delays, if it's as some of the ministers present at the time around the table argue that we cannot delay them for more than 9 months, which might be practically 18 months, that's a little bit, it starts
Why
to
couldn't
be
you? Why couldn't you convince you're Israel's most decorated soldier? Why couldn't you convince the military leadership, the uniformed leadership, and the intelligence service at the time to do this?
I don't think that I can dive into it and convince you why, or probably some of them are here in the room.
Most
why
of them
I couldn't
are here,
convince
actually.
them. It's you know, I was asked once by the American president, by Obama, have you noticed that your own generals do not agree with you about it? I asked him, did not it happen to you as well from time to time that you think in the same way and your generals think separately? I explained to him the difference. I told him when the generals looking upward, they see, in our case, myself and Bibi. When we look upwards, we see heaven. Might be someone there, or might be empty, but it's clear that we have the responsibility.
I assume the beard means that there's someone there, actually.
I'm closer, just in case there is someone there. So that's our story. It's probably an issue for historians, probably for psychologists. I don't want to dive into it. As a matter of fact, we failed to convince. I see here some of the people who were deeply involved in trying to convince from all directions. We couldn't do it.
So go to the issue
But
of how you became a dove on the issue.
I think that some of the events which happened now in North Korea, and which I hope will be blocked from happening in Iran, will cause some of us or some of the members of this decision-making teams to have a second thought about whether it was so stupid or so risky as some saw it to do it at a certain point. But of course, always, only if it were the last resort.
But what I'm hearing from you, I don't want to stay on this forever, but what I'm hearing from you is you think it was a mistake not to do it.
No, you don't hear me anything beyond what I said. But I didn't say, you heard exactly what I've said, and that's it. But let me tell you you asked about the deal. I didn't change my mind. The deal is a bad deal. Whenever I'm asked, what's your feelings about this Iran deal, I answer, mixed feelings. You know what is mixed feelings? It is when your mother-in-law takes your new BMW and drives it over the cliff. That's something that everyone understands. So it's really a bad deal. And we don't need, I'm really regret that the senator is not here because, I prefer boxing over schmoozing, but I happened to listen to him several times on the TV and hear what he had to say about it. So basically, we Israelis, we don't have to get any lectures about the fact that Iran is bad, that the Ayatollahs are bad guys. There are no really moderate Ayatollahs, and that they are doing many bad things. We don't need any lectures about it. But when it comes to the decertification of this agreement or deal, you have to ask yourself, what's the meaning of it? What will happen? I thought it's a mistake to raise it. Reason is the following. Even if you decertify it, or even America takes a further step and pull out of the agreement, it's still done. It's a bad deal, but it is a done deal. It's a done deal. It means that's a matter of fact. It's an apple, not a banana. And it's something that you have to recognize. So what will happen? It throws the problem to the Congress. The Congress probably have another 2 weeks or so. The Congress will do nothing beyond probably a short-living, temporary, face-saving formula for the president. It will not change anything because there are other signatories. They will not pull out of it. So it will not change anything for the Iranians. If it changes anything, it makes them in a better situation. It's a win-win. They can keep harvesting the benefits of this agreement. And at the same time, if the time comes when they decide to break out, which is clearly a possibility at the second half of the timeline of the agreement, of the deal, they will be able to argue that it is somehow legitimized by the fact that the United States left it. Now, the United States is busy now with North Korea. Basically, underneath all the rhetoric, don't spread the word, but I don't believe that America, although being the mightiest power on earth, and they can evaporate all North Korea, but that doesn't mean that they have a surgical military option to destroy the nuclear military plan of North Korea. So think of it. I'll come to the technical.
No, but I want to bring up North Korea. I want to bring up North Korea because you said, what would Tom Cotton say? What Tom Cotton would say is North Korea draws the lesson from the Iran deal that if you just stick with your program, eventually you'll get international recognition for your program. Because what the Iran deal is, in fact, is delayed international recognition for your right.
I think it's the opposite. The Iranians are learning from the North Korean experience. They learned that if they can defy the whole world for long enough, they might come out with that. In this regard, there is still work to do in terms of blocking and making sure that the Iranians will not turn into military and nuclear power under whatever situation. The question, what it has to do with the deal? It's nothing to do with the deal right now. The North Koreans, which are now basically, America is trying to grab them, drag them into certain negotiation, supported by the Chinese and the Russians somehow, they will ask, What the hell is that? How comes you ask us to negotiate with the Americans if you can wake up after 2.5 years and find that they just cancel it, they don't have the mood to continue? That doesn't help. Now, if somehow Cotton was right, that it helps in the longer term, we have to consider it. And I listened to him. What he raises, basically, things that all of us know. The Iranians keep doing bad things. They are developing long-range ballistic missiles, which ultimately might be able to carry nuclear weapons. They are spreading terror all around the region. They help the Lebanese in Syria and whatever. These are bad things. They are even extremely active on the cyber front. All these are bad things. But what the hell is the relation to the deal? If you, America, wants to put an end to this development of intercontinental ballistic missile, you don't need it intercontinental. You can announce that ballistic missiles of medium range in Iran, which reach the heart of Europe, is touching the vital national interests of the United States, and start to work upon it. When you do it in relations to the deal, you make it more complicated. You make it more complicated here at the Congress. You make it more complicated with your allies. You make it more complicated in any way. So the only reason, I should admit, when I looked at it from all possible directions, is that the real reason that they relate the needed steps vis-a-vis Iran into this deal has to do with what I called ABB. Anything but Barak, not me. And that's the only explanation. Why the hell you need the deal for?
But let me stay channeling Tom Cotton for a minute. What Tom Cotton would say, listening to you, is you acknowledge Iran as a bad actor. You acknowledge Iran poses a serious threat to Israel. You acknowledge that they're not going to change their behavior. So why not deal with tomorrow the problem rather than 10 years down the road when they're that much closer to being able to move to break out, when they have a lot more money, a better missile technology, and so on. You're just avoiding the problem.
I'm not talking about delaying for 10 years. There are things that have to be done now if you are ready to do it. But the talk
like
about
what?
reaching, I will come to the details. But reaching is through the deal and through destroying the deal and expecting that it will create better place to promote your interests is just an illusion. We know it from our experience. Sometimes the leadership create a kind of a whole structure made of rhetoric that doesn't have a content, a substance in it. And you have to be convinced, but you cannot be convinced. It doesn't work this way. There are many things to do. For example, if the missiles, as I mentioned, is a bad thing, go negotiate with your allies, see whether you bring the Europeans to block them. It's about Europe first before they reach the United States. See whether you can bring together China and Russia. It would be easier if you don't attach it to the deal but does it independently. If they refuse, America is mighty enough to decide on its own that it's a strategic interest in the United States. Raise it on your own. Issue warning. Initiate sanctions. But what the hell it has to do with this deal? Now, in regard to the deal itself, we have to come behind closed doors, Israel and America, but for sure America with the other signatories, and decide what constitutes a breakout. Detailed definition is needed both for the IAEA and for our intelligence communities. Then decide what kind of sanctions you are going to impose if they pass this threshold and try to move toward it. Okay, that's good. Then decide how you are going to respond with sanctions and other things. And all this won't work unless America will have the big stick in the background. Namely, will mobilize the intelligence, the means, and more than anything else, the political will to take even independent unilateral American operation to destroy it. And I tell you, I used to scorn American presidents when we dealt with Iran. I told them, you know, when we are talking about surgical operation, we have in mind scalpels. When you talk on surgical operation, you seem to think of chisel and 10 pounds hammer. That's something different, but I should admit that in the last 4 years or 4 years, America under Obama and Panetta and the Pentagon developed extremely fine scalpels, much finer than what we have or can dream of having. So to all those who absorbed the observation that was promoted by the previous administration, that it is either signing the deal or a major war with Iran that will look like Afghanistan or Iraq. That's not true. There is a way to do it in extremely surgical manner in a very successful now. But you can do it now, you can do it in 4 years, and you will be able to do it even in 8 years from now.
3 or 4 years ago, you said that Iran posed an existential threat to Israel. Now you say that it doesn't pose an existential threat, but it could pose an existential threat. How do you judge when something is moved to existential? I mean, if there are sunset clauses in this, why doesn't Iran remain? Why doesn't Iran remain a long-term existential threat to Israel?
I want to correct you once again. Go into the record. You'll find that I'm like a robot. Repeat the same words with the same language. At most, I translate it into a little bit poor English, but it's the same content exactly. I never said that they are, at any given point in the past, had been an existential threat to Israel. But I warned, even as a chief of staff in '92, I warned in a lecture at the university, it's also on the record, I warned, Israel should try to use this window of opportunity. I talked about '92 to 2000, before Iran turns into nuclear and before another wave of Muslim terror overwhelms the whole region. And I was not the only one who warned. So we saw it. The moment Iran tries to become nuclear military power, if they succeed, they become potentially, in the longer term, an existential threat. But I was always, even within our government, I was in a way more hawkish than Netanyahu and Lieberman about this Iran issue. But I never liked this catastrophic talk that was both behind closed doors and sometimes in the public, talking about Europe in '38 and whatever, and run some comparison with apocalyptic tinge. Reason is I always used to ask my colleagues in the government, what do you think a sober Jew had to do in Europe in '38? He had to flee out of Europe. So what is the nimshal? I don't know. What is the parallel right now? I once told Netanyahu, assume for a moment the worst. Assume that the Iranians capitulated under pressure, threats, whatever. They destroyed Kashan and Natanz. They moved to Russia or Kazakhstan all the enriched uranium. They expel all the scientists. Can we wish something better? No. Perfect situation. Now you wake up one morning, a year and a half later, and see on the news that there was a political meltdown in Pakistan. And when the dust settles, after 2 weeks, you end up finding that there are half a dozen of nuclear weapons in Saudi Arabia and half a dozen nuclear weapons in Iran. And it's not just hypothetical guess, what I'm describing here. So are we going to wrap our pekalach, as we say in Yiddish, and go back to North Africa and Eastern? No, we are here to stay. We are still the mightiest power around, and they will better beware even with the 6 nuclear weapons. So Israel is much stronger. That part of my debate with our present government. We are so strong. The public just has to know. Middle East is much tougher kind of place. It's not like the Midwest. And it's a really tough neighborhood. But as a result of 7 decades of achievements, we are the mightiest power around. And backed by the United States and by technological edge, we will remain so in the foreseeable future. So we can look at our reality not with existential fears, not seeing shadows on the walls, not mentioning the Hitler of the day, and not looking for traitors from within. We should have enough self-confidence to decide our future the way Zionism did from day one.
So you say that you say that you give interviews like robots, but like a robot. But I've read some of your recent interviews.
I repeat my words in order not to face such questions.
I've read some of your recent interviews, and they are quite spontaneous. In some of your expressions, and I've read your Twitter.
I'm trumping.
You're close. You're not quite there yet. You're close, but you're not quite there. But let me ask you the question. You said controversially that you'd be the best man, the best person in Israel right now to be prime minister. Why do you believe that? And do you actually believe that Avi Gabay would not be as good?
That's also not what I've said, but I use the opportunity that Avi Gabay is here to tell you what I've said. I said that I got a poll. Someone sent me, an American guy, sent me a poll that showed that if a direct election in Israel would be held now and I would run against Bibi, in the secular part of the Israeli population, I would win over him. I even mentioned that in the overall population, he would win, even with higher margin. But that none of us get 40%, and 35% see an acting prime minister on one hand and the old tweeting person on the other hand can't decide for whom to vote. So I said, okay, objectively, I'm more ripe and capable of running the country than any other candidate, including Bibi, who has experience but doesn't have or lost the capacity to make decisions. But I said there is no direct election, like it or not. My time as prime minister left enough scars on the left side of the body politic that if leftists have choice, they will not necessarily vote for the party where I am. And that I'm not a great political manipulator and less than mediocre ego kind of melatef, kind of ego schmoozer. And both these elements are very important in politics. So basically I told the Abramovich was the guy that yeah, objectively I'm better, but in practice, that. And I continue to say that Avi Gabay, many of you, the Israelis know him, but the Americans will learn about him, that he's very good.
So let's just
I like him very, but why do you stop me right now? It's very good, and he can become.
So you're endorsing Avi Gabay. You're endorsing. All right, I got it.
Full-heartedly.
But my question
when
for you.
When he started, only myself and his mother, which is about my age, believed in him. But now more and more believe.
My question for you boiled down is this. Are you a businessman or are you a future political leader in Israel? In your own mind?
In my own mind, I'm a worried citizen. I had been in almost any possible position in Israel, and I liked it very much. Unlike some of my followers, I never complained, and never explained too much, and I could not even mimic self-victimization. I cannot be a victim even for a moment, for show. So I'm happy. I never felt any kind of bitterness. I know that I'm responsible to what happened, whether people like it or not, under my control. I'm very proud of what I did. And under the same uncertainties, I might have do the same once again. And so I'm satisfied, but I'm deeply worried about the direction that Israel is taking. In the last 3 years, we have for the first time pure right-wing government, which cannot anymore hide its real agenda. In the past, they can always complain, oh, we tried, but Yair Lapid didn't let us, Tzipi Livni, Barak is there, we cannot do what we want. Now, there are no excuses anymore, so it ends up that the real agenda of this government is one-state solution, creeping annexation of the West Bank, and a setting basically practically, because none of us know whether it's even possible to think of any breakthrough in the peace process right now. But most of Israel, I can tell you, 70% of Israelis believe in two-state solution. 80% believe in separation. I just said, why? What's the difference? There is a difference. Israel never want to be suckers. So two-state solution, it sounds as if you are yielding to a demand or a right of the Palestinians. Separation is something more neutral. And 85% support divorce. Divorce is more kind of divorce. Talagha.
We're going to
some Arab ambassadors there.
Yeah.
So basically, the right-wing government ends up moving in an agenda which I believe is the real threat, existential threat in the long term to Israel. It's not the Iranians. I don't underestimate, I don't ignore them. It's not Daesh or Hezbollah or anyone else. All of those are threats that should be dealt with. The real threat is our internal strength, internal stability, and it's threatened by this agenda because one-state solution will end inevitably. None in the room, including, I see here, the leader of Beit Yehudi, none of us can show a way out of this corrales. One-state solution will end up either with non-Jewish or non-democratic, probably both state, and deeply immersed into violence, and that can be a real tragedy that has to be avoided at almost any price.
We're going to go to questions in a minute. But one more quick question for you. Jerusalem, there seems to be a good chance that the U.S. is going to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital next week. Do you agree with that move? And B, what do you think the regional and local consequences will be if the U.S. makes that announcement and actually tries to execute that?
I like the idea very much. Regret that it didn't happen 10, 20, or 65 years ago. I think that all embassies of all nations should be in Jerusalem. That's a natural situation. I don't think that that alone will kill any option for dealing, but the sensitivities about the exact timing and the exact wording is something to be done by diplomats by prodding the water, the thermometer, and see. Probably there is some deal here we can go. What really disturbs me is not this issue. I will be happy to hear that the embassy is moved, not just that there is a statement announcing the self-evident. Who thinks? It's probably General Mattis thought that it's probably Tel Aviv when he was in the Congress kind of interviewed. I don't think that he knows also Jerusalem. So basically everyone knows it's self-evident. I don't see it a great kind of...
but what would be the consequences? You think violence would erupt?
I don't think that this is a consequential event, especially if it will be the Arabs will let be known in advance and explain to them that it doesn't close the door on any future American effort. It's much more consequential what kind of plan will be proposed by the Trump administration. If it will be just a kind of illustration of a possible way out that both sides will be invited to deal with, we will see something that we are seeing for the last 10 years once and again. The blame game starts before even they end to read, both sides, end to read the text. So it's true that the Palestinians, in my judgment, bear most of the responsibility, the fact that we are stuck. But when I ask myself whether we could do more, not because of them, not in order to satisfy any need or right of the Palestinians or justice for them, because of our own interest, to hold the moral high ground. What I see as a major problem for Israel that we lost this instinct that Zionism had from day one to always hold the moral ground. However tough the reality on the ground, however demanding the situation, sometimes you have to live with certain ambiguities, but always hold the moral ground in the minds of your own people in order to hold them united, in the minds of the Jewish communities in the world, in the mind of friends in the advanced world. After all, Western Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand, that's our reference group. The rest of the 160 nations where we do a lot of mileage, we make visits, they visit, and it's great for photo ops. The real core of our identity are those countries, and we should make sure that we hold the moral high ground there. When you look at the crisis that we have now with America, especially young generation, and with many people who were kind of devoted supporters of Israel for decades in their own nations, you see that the real underlying cause that we lost this instinct, the instinct to always find a way to make sure that if something is rejected, it will be genuinely understood by objective observers and friends all around the world as being rejected because of the insistent obstination or whatever on the other side, not because Israel was kind of framing it in a way that does not allow it to fly.
We're going to go to some questions. Chaim, you have something?
You want me to ask a question?
God forbid.
Usually you have one.
No, I just, it's
At least one.
I have a Pavlovian response by this point.
Well, you asked the question, he didn't answer. So I'll ask the question again. Are you thinking, not are you going to, are you thinking about getting back into politics?
About coming back
Going
to
to
politics?
politics.
You know, we learned in early...
It's a yes and no.
No. I
I'm not-
I happen to know the two words, and I know when to choose them and when not.
I am not Goldberg.
Listen.
Yes or no?
Listen. We learned at early age in politics, never say never. I
Yes.
cannot...
It's
no,
yes. Yes, we
No.
can get another question. No, you just said yes.
No. And so I cannot...
Hold on. Now I'm confused. You said yes, he said no.
So it's, when we ask
Ella
about...
Fitzgerald and Louis
when
Armstrong?
we ask...
No.
He didn't rule out a political career, which means he's ruling in a political
Chaim,
career.
when we will ask Jeff Goldberg, are you going to enter politics? Answer in yes or no, take his word for him. When you ask me, I recommend to you to take my word. So
I'm taking a wait-and-see attitude, by
I
the way,
cannot
myself.
exclude the situation that might drive me to contemplate it. But having in mind what kind of situation should be, I prefer that it will never happen and that Avi Gabay will come to. I rely on him and I trust him to do the right thing at the right moment and win. He already showed this capacity to win against everyone.
So yes or no?
Can you go over there to
No.
Dennis? Chaim, watch. Dennis is going to have a much more sophisticated way of asking the question. It's over here, Mr.
Ehud, you went through and you described what is the real existential threat to Israel. You described how up to 85% of Israelis prefer divorce. And yet...
I can't hear you. Can you...
I'll repeat.
Yeah.
It's an echo.
It's either my ears, after too many shots, it starts to influence
Okay.
my hearing, yeah.
Ehud, you said that the real existential threat to Israel is becoming a binational state, one state.
Yeah.
You said 85% of the Israeli public would prefer divorce. And yet, there seems to be no real debate within Israel.
There seems to be
No
real
real
debate.
debate
no,
Real debate.
yeah.
Debate.
within Israel over the danger that you're describing. So how do you explain that?
I'm not sure that I have a full explanation. My feeling is the following. There is a difference in political culture between right and left, not just in Israel, all around the world. Right electorate behaves like football club fans. They are always enthusiastic. They never lose trust in their team. They don't replace the team after 3 repeated kind of losses. They're always ready to jump on the referee to remind him what his mother was doing when she was young. And whatever is needed, they want to win. Left electorate behaves, Avi now learns it, behaves like debate club in an Ivy League university. You sit in an air-conditioned room with top-quality people, and you contemplate normative issues, how the world should have looked like. Now, how to go outside and grab power and start to drive the whole thing. So it's not easy. I don't envy the leaders of left-wing anywhere. And so that's one element. I remember talking to my general committee or central committee of the party, some thousands of people, 8 years ago when I still was head of labor. I told them, look, I'm 68, not now, I was there. I'm 68. Since I was born, we had only, the Likud had only 4 leaders. Begin, Shamir, Sharon, Bibi, set 2. I have a grandchild, he's 8 years old then. Since he was born, we have 6. And I was most of the time. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a great politician. Shimon Peres is much bigger than Fuad Ben Eliezer, Amir Peretz. They are great political players. No one survived. So it means that we have certain malaise. And it's real malaise. So the passivity of the left is a malaise. And the left should be shaken much more strongly in order to wake up. That's what I try to contribute in my kind of public behavior right now, including the blatant kind of words that I choose just in order to help people to wake up. Now, there is another more subtle layer. There is a difference in the value sets of the right and the left, not just in Israel. The left, being liberal, basically have only a matrix made of 3 elements. Hillel HaZaken, or the categorical imperative of Kant, you know, it's don't do to others what you don't like will be done to you, and so on. Certain honesty, I don't cheat on you, don't cheat on me. A certain general belief that freedom is better than oppression. With these 3 elements, you're a liberal, cosmopolitan, you can land in Manhattan, in Berlin, in Paris, you are among colleagues and comrades. It doesn't mean that they will really help you if you need something, but they are ideological colleagues and comrades. The right wing have a wider set. They understand these values of the individual, the need to be honest, the need to help each other, even that freedom is better than oppression. But they have a wider set, what is called the community values. They respect a group that they belong to, smaller than the whole world. They accept authority. We know from long before we started to write and read that even hunter-gatherers, if you have a band of more than 150, you should have a leader. Otherwise, you are chaotic. Those cultures that could not adopt a leader disappeared. And the part of the community values is a respect that certain things are sacred. Not anything, everything at any moment of the smallest whim is a subject to discussion. It doesn't mean that there is no development of values and there is no learning from history and what happens. But there is a basic respect to certain elements should be sacred. Now think of it. The left wing, if the leaders will not internalize, not just learn to talk about, but internalize that when you talk to the public, to the electorate, you are talking to people who think of themselves in those terms, in those values. They want to belong to a group. They respect authority. They hold certain things sacred. If you do not respect it, and they don't feel that it's genuine, they will not vote for you. So it's a major challenge. And now for the last element, and I'm speaking especially for the Israelis here. The right wing, especially Bibi and Lieberman before them, educated the Israel public to judge its identity, political identity, through 2 filters. I call it the Finkelstein, late out of Finkelstein questions. Question number 1, inward looking. Question number 2, outward looking. Inward looking. Are you first of all Israeli and then Jew? Or are you first Jew and then Israeli? My answer for it, I'm Jew and Israeli at the same time, at the same level exactly. But when you ask your question, they select you. If you are first Israeli, you are left. If you are first Jew, you are right. Second is outward-looking question. Do you love Arabs or do you hate Arabs? If you love Arabs, you are left. If you hate Arabs, you are right. As long as we agree that these are the filters that should be used, the right wing will be forever in power. It is only if we change it from this kind of identity questions into much more substantial ones. These identity questions are the traditional questions of any, I don't want to use the word fascist, any ultranational movement. They always look for enemies beyond any reconciliation from the out and traitors from within. So you have to make these differentiations. We need another call, which is going with this 85% for divorce. We need to convince the public that the real questions on the table are the following. Are you supportive or against the 3 pillars of the Israeli modern Zionist identity? Number 1, security, above and ahead of anything else. Every Israeli understands this. Second, shleimut ha'am lifnei shleimut ha'aretz. The integrity and unity of the people is ahead of the integrity of the unity, the great prey to possess the whole biblical country under our control. And third, the Declaration of Independence is our de facto constitution. I tell you, I checked it, 80+% of Israelis support those 3 elements. So how comes that when you ask them these dividing questions, the Finkelstein question, more than half, probably 60% are white, and when you ask the real substantive issue, what do you support and what you are against, 85 agree to it. Because the right wing made years before the terms fake news, alternative facts, or whataboutism got some traction in English, we had it without calling it with this name. The right wing in Israel very successfully telling the people, we are for those 3 pillars. Of course, we are the greatest supporters of security ahead, everything else. We are for shleimut ha'am lifnei shleimut ha'aretz. Lieberman enters the Ministry of Defense, he is now, of course, I am for 2 states, I am for shleimut ha'am lifnei shleimut ha'aretz. And we are for the principles of the Independence Declaration. But when you look at the behavior, it's the opposite. And that's the role of the opposition, to torn apart day and night, every day, torn apart the masks and tell the public, you know, you have a leadership who plays a masquerade ball. I don't know how it's called. They pretend to work for these 3 elements and they destroy them at the same time. Because I will tell you something even more severe. Because the agenda of one state, everyone understands, in order to implement it, you will have to need practices and steps which are plainly against the Israeli and international law. You will have to do it. So, when you understand it, you have to do something. We are facing right now a direct assault by the government, elected government. It's also my government. I don't like it, but it's my government as well. This government is attacking, assaulting the Supreme Court, the civil society, the free media, and even the ethical codes of the IDF. Directly, head on. And if we, the Israelis, will not wake up and block it, we will pay the price.
Dennis, did that answer your question?
Part of it. That was the short version.
Yeah. I have time for one more tweet-sized question and tweet-sized answer. Is that Danny in the back? I can't.
280.
Yeah, the 280,000 character answer.
Mr. Barak, I will do it very briefly.
Take it a little bit down.
I will do it very briefly, Mr. Barak.
Please, very briefly.
You described the way right-wing people refer to the situation and answer questions, and how the left in the air-conditioned philosophical debates. And then you gave a typical left-wing answer to the question of Mr. Ross. I think that the reason, the simple answer to the question of Mr. Ross is that Israelis overwhelmingly do not believe that the Palestinians are ready to have peace with Israel. And actually, you were the first person that rightfully thought that the Israelis.
So I will answer about it also in 80. Look, we all agree among ourselves Israelis that probably the objective situation right now is, even with Olmert or Rabin or Peres or myself or Bibi at the previous round, with the most generous proposal, probably it cannot fly right now. There still is a question. So what are you doing in the meantime? I see here Amnon Reshev. It's a time to read the pamphlet of Commanders for Israel Security, as it also in English, .org.il. They describe what should be done according to our experts on security, heads of the IDF, Shabak, Mossad, police. And basically the question comes to the following. We all agree that the settlement blocks and the neighborhoods in Jerusalem, which include 80% of the settlement population, should remain in Israel for under any kind of permanent arrangement. We all agree that, or the question remains, what to do with the last 20% of settlers, about 100,000, who are spread over what we call the isolated settlements, about 100 of them. And the question is, what are we doing in this window when there is no way still to have an agreement? Are we trying to strengthen Israel, fortify it, make a kind of solidify our internal unity and our identity, and always leaving the opportunity for the divorce? Or are we deliberately trying to put sticks into the kind of probability of any divorce in the future through keep the creeping annexation, keep putting an Israeli or developing Israeli settlement in between any two other Arab villages? I want to tell you you know, we are now 10 years after the disengagement from Gaza led by Sharon, out of all people, you know, it was kind of a gallant U-turn at the end of his career. And three examples are in front of us of different relationships between Israel presence, settlement presence, Israel control of security, and what happens to terror. There is the Gaza Strip. We pulled out both the settlements and the IDF, and we do not have a overall responsibility for security. The result, missiles, more than 10,000, covering 2/3 of Israel. We have Judea and the southern part of Shomron, where there are settlements beyond the settlement blocks. I don't talk about settlement blocks, it's part of the agreed part of Israel. There are isolated settlements, and Israel is responsible for security. So what we have there, we have daily friction because there are settlers and Arabs living inside each other. We have terror inside this area, and we have terror from this area into Israel proper. And we have a third example in a corner. Sharon wanted to hint to the Arab world, to the Americans or whatever, that Gaza is not the end of the story. So he evacuated 4 small settlements around Jenin. So now we have the whole area from Masira el-Shimalia, just out of Nablus, until Jenin, with a unique situation. Israel is still responsible, overall responsibility for security, but there are no settlers. The result, there is no friction within, there is no terror within, and there is no terror from there outward toward Israel. It's a food for thought. It tells you that not everything is lost and we have to behave responsibly along the way, in a way that we keep options rather than kill options.
We're going to go right into Havdalah now, I think. I want to thank Ehud Barak very much for coming tonight. Thank you very much, sir.